Hey, Wiz. All right. So vibe coders today, they're coming for all of our software engineering jobs, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. It's pretty
yeah.
much.
It's a unstoppable train at this point.
That's right. That's right. There's a real difference though between vibe coding and like what you actually need to do to become an AI engineer today. What we'll call today AI assisted development. It's not the same. And importantly, we're going to cover the differences today. Why is vibe coding not quite enough in 2025?
Yeah, I mean it's enough to create fun applications, as we'll see.
Yeah.
It's enough to help you, go the extra mile for projects. It's super good for weekend projects, small games and stuff like that. It's missing the ability to create production software. It's missing a lot of the extra steps that you need to think about and work through and do when you're creating real applications, right? It's real good at writing code that works mostly though, so good for it.
That's right. And importantly, we want to be able to vibe code and build production LLM applications. And that's the goal of the AI Engineering Challenge today. It's the genius of the and here. How can we vibe code things like a front end while building a production grade backend? That's what you're going to show us how to do today, isn't it?
That's right.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Well, this is something we've been working on for a long time. This is something that we did our first iteration on back in 2023 when we were just getting started with AI Makerspace. And in 2022, before that, when we were teaching boot camps, the stack has evolved, and we're going to cover the evolution today with the audience. So I'm excited for this, Wiz. We're going to go back to basics here because even looking at something like the chat completions API from OpenAI, it has also evolved, even though it came out in 2023 and became a gold standard. So this is a fun revamp. I'm excited for this one, and we've got a lot of discussions along the way. You'll let us know why we're picking specific tools as best practice tools and how everybody out there can get started building, shipping, and sharing today with vibe coding and some production grade engineering. Should be a fun one today.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It is, a necessary revamp. The world has changed since we made that challenge in the first place. It's time to see what people can do now.
What's it mean to be an AI engineer? Let's find out today, Wiz. We'll see you back for plenty of discussions throughout, and certainly some vibes before the end as well. All right, guys, welcome to the 2025 AI Engineer Challenge. This is fully revamped for this year, the year of agents, the year of vibe coding, the year of AI-assisted code editors, and of AI-assisted development. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you're looking to just get started as a beginner, this is a perfect place to really take your ability to vibe code to the next level. And if you're sort of a classic audience member that's been following what we've been doing for a long time, this is a nice little way to check out what some of the more recent updates in the industry, what effects those might have on your default prototyping stack when you go out to build production grade LLM applications today. So let's go ahead, and if you have questions along the way, please do ask, especially during the discussion portions, either in the Slido link that's on your viewing platform in the description box, or if you're live with us on YouTube or LinkedIn, go ahead and just smash a comment into the chat and we'll do our best to get to it. All right, let's kick it off. The AI Engineer Challenge. We're going to show you how to build, ship, and share your first LLM application today. Okay, so what do we want to do today? Well, let's align ourselves to the session here. We want to make sure that we show you what the best practice prototyping stack, super simple, but actually end-to-end looks like in 2025. We're going to show you how to use the OpenAI API like a developer. In fact, there's some new language around this, specifically using the word developer as a role now rather than the system prompt. And we're going to talk about this difference between AI-assisted development and vibe coding in more detail. And we're going to show you how you can actually do both with a tool like Cursor or Windsurf or others. We believe Cursor is the best practice tool today. And it's important to understand the difference. It's important to be able to navigate your way through the difference if you want to truly do production grade LLM engineering and AI engineering today. And of course, we're going to show you exactly how to complete the AI Engineer Challenge. So, but before the end of the day, and even potentially before the end of the session, you can build, ship, and share your very own first LLM application. So I want to talk a little bit about the stack first, then we'll get into the API, and then we'll get into some of the AI-assisted development versus vibe coding discussion that I think is so important for everybody to understand today. Let's talk about the stack first. And this is rooted in the idea of the way we like to define AI engineering. That is, as the industry relevant set of skills that data science and engineering teams need to successfully build, deploy, operate, and improve large language model applications in production. Okay. There's a well-known LLM app stack. And I think this is sort of the leading representation of the way we can think about building these in the industry. This was put together by A16Z in June 2023, updated in May 2024. And it's based in this idea of the sort of core idea of prompt engineering that came out of the GPT-3 paper in 2020. And that is this idea of in-context learning. It's all about putting the right stuff into the context window. And leveraging this design pattern, whether it's through retrieval, augmented generation, or through agents, is fundamental to how we think about building these applications today. And while you can sort of look across this stack and focus on embeddings and retrieval and how to do inference and how to do monitoring and how to do logging and how to put on guardrails and how to do all this different stuff, we actually don't need to focus on very much of that to get started. This is the stack visualized, and you can kind of see that in the center we have some way to do this orchestration. We're going to have some sort of way to host our application. And importantly, we're going to have some sort of API on the back end, whether it's an open or closed API, doesn't really matter. We need to be able to hit an endpoint that gives us a response back from an LLM. Now, all of this stuff up top here, we don't really need to worry about today. This is more associated with building your first RAG application, or if you want to connect to external APIs, that's going to be where you sort of are able to hit, things agentically. You're able to sort of call tools and functions. You can talk about caching and LLM ops and validation and guardrails, but we actually don't need to talk about almost any of that to build our very first application. And we actually don't need to focus on many of these arrows either. We need to focus on just a couple, the blue and the red. And we need to focus on just a few of these boxes. We need to focus on hosting the app, orchestrating any application logic, and connecting things up so that we can hit an API and we can serve back the response to our user. You imagine the user sits here, asks a question. That question goes into the orchestration. That heads back to the LLM. The response back on the red lines comes back into the app and is provided to the user as an output. This is the simplest possible LLM application that we want to consider. And we've picked a couple of tools that we're going to go through today with you. One is Vercel. This is the best app hosting tool that we believe exists today. The orchestration is quite simple. We are Python developers. We're going to leverage the OpenAI Python software development kit. This is a really great Python library, perfect little starter kit, especially if you're going to leverage an OpenAI API endpoint of one of their models, which of course we are, and we're going to pick one of the more recent, the most recent GPT 4.1 mini, although we'll show you how to put a few options in there if you'd like. Now, importantly, this piece right here, hosting the app, this is a part where a lot of people often get confused, and historically myself included here. We want to kind of think about the back end and the front end existing almost at this intersection. And we can kind of think of this kind of back end as often being, whether we can see it explicitly or not, a back end that is kind of using a FastAPI server. Now, historically, you might have used Django or Flask or some other types of web app frameworks, but FastAPI has really emerged as the leader here. And so you'll find it underlying a lot of the different back-end app hosting that you might do. We will go ahead and build this back-end today for you so that you can simply worry about hosting it. This is an important piece, especially if you're trying to build production-grade applications. Now, on the other side of app hosting, this is sort of where the user asks the query and we get a response in output. This is where vibe coding comes in. This is where we can leverage some of these cool vibe tools to quickly build a front end. We don't need a sort of static front end anymore. We can kind of go with the flow of whatever we think our users are going to like. We can kind of leverage some of the more fun terminology, make it a little more menacing, make it a little more dark mode, make it a little more fun. And we can really embrace the vibes here on the front end. And it really makes front end development much more approachable. So we highly recommend doing this. And this is our recommendation and one of the pieces of the challenge we want you to all go through. And this is it. This is all we need to do to really get started building, shipping, and sharing our first LLM application. So I'd like to bring Wiz back up to discuss here selection of these tools here. So why Vercel? I mean, historically, we've been teaching this and we used Hugging Face Spaces. We used basically the Hugging Face hub for people to kind of put their apps up and host them. And we highly recommended that for a long time. Why is Vercel really a leading tool today for app hosting?
Yeah, I mean, I would think about it from a number of different perspectives, right? One of the perspectives I think is important is that simply AI engineering is less and less directly and intimately linked with the Hugging Face ecosystem these days, right? So when we were getting started, we were fine-tuning models a lot. We were deploying models ourselves. We were, really embroiled in the Hugging Face ecosystem. These days, not so much, right? There's a lot of different ways we can host model endpoints. There's a lot of different ways that we can think about constructing apps. And a great question in chat: why Vercel as opposed to AWS, GCP, Azure? It's a great question. In reality, it's because Vercel is very good at the thing that it does, which is hosting these front end application with these very lightweight backends, right? Yep. You'll see today the backend is extremely lightweight, and also the kind of benefit to us. Yeah. If you recall the old challenge, we had to create a repo, push it to Hugging Face, blah 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 blah, all these other things. And with Vercel, you type Vercel, and then you hit enter, and then your app is in the deployed with a URL that you can share with people, right? And that's the big motivation for choosing something like Vercel. Both it's sufficient for what we need it to be doing, which is hosting these applications. Also, it simplifies a lot of our life. It has some additional features that we're not going to really touch on today, but will help you more if you want to go deeper. And it's easy to use. That's right. Everything you need.
Yeah, and this idea of quick prototyping is so important in these early stages. If you want to get something to just show your boss, show your stakeholders, you don't want to have to deal with the CSP that your company uses and have to go through the entire engineering and security team like off the bat. This is something we want to do quickly, want to do efficiently, want to make sure that we can get it into the hands of a stakeholder or user to say, hey, play with this real quick. Am I on the right track before we get into this super scalability space of the big CSPs? Okay. Great question, Black Currant, always bringing it. Love it. And then in terms of we're actually suggesting people vibe code Why vibe coding? Why generally are we recommending this React framework? What's the 2 cents here? I mean, I kind of discussed already that vibe coding is perfect for front ends. Most of us aren't front end devs. Beyond that, do you have any comments on why we suggest vibe coding today versus a static thing, and why React?
Yeah, I mean, so vibe coding is really good at what this is meant to be, which is a very quick POC, right? The ability to interact with the app in a specific way with a specific theme, et cetera, is important to be able to do quickly. That's why we suggest vibe coding for the front end. And it's, you should start with vibe coding, right? But you should move towards AI assisted development, right? As quickly as possible. Once you do a couple of these POCs, you're going to have better understanding of the project. You're going to be able to build your rules out a little bit better. You're going to be able to interact more. You'll quickly find yourself diving into the code instead of into the prompts, right? But to just get things kicked off and get a front end out the door, rather than just some boring chainlet looking thing, the same old Gradio looking thing, right? The barrier to entry for a front end that doesn't look plain is so low now with these tools like Cursor and models like Claude. Why React, or in this case we're using Next.js, just because like that's the standard. For Vercel, they are the same company that does Next.js, so they work real well with it. Why not?
That's right.
But the idea is some JavaScript framework, whatever your favorite one is, really. If you don't have a favorite, the model will choose one for you, right? And it's just down to the fact that these build nice looking UIs very quickly, and the models are good at them, right? And that's something that you have to keep in mind as well. We want to choose something the model is going to succeed with, right? So we don't want to choose some brand new, just came out, front end. We want to use something that's been around, it's that the model's been able to train on a lot, and that's the idea.
Yeah. So there's multiple frameworks, just like on the back end, on the front end, that we could use. But importantly, that sort of Vercel created the Next.js framework, and those are the creators of it. They started the company Vercel. And you can get as old school as you'd like, I think, with a lot of this stuff. And I think one of the next pieces of this, and again, we sort of hear the same: quick start, get it going, get it up and running. Now, are we talking about the iterations? You want to keep vibe coding on the iterations? Please fix this error. Please fix this error. So that's where we start to get into more AI assisted development. Is going to be more helpful. Okay, when we talk about this orchestration, I mean, maybe orchestration is even kind of a heavy word for the OpenAI Python SDK. We typically think about orchestrators for agentic systems, for RAG applications. Why did we choose this? And we've got a question in the chat here. Could we sort of leverage any model with this, not just OpenAI models?
So why did we choose this? Because behind the scenes, everyone's using this, okay? And if they're not using this, there's a wrapper so that you can use it with this. Everything is everything that you see is a OpenAI API compatible endpoint for the most part. What this means is whether you're hosting things on Hugging Face, whether you're hosting things on Together AI, whether you're hosting things on whatever else, right? You're using build.nvidia.com endpoints, whatever you're using, doesn't matter, right? You can address that URL or that endpoint with the OpenAI API, SDK, and this is why we suggest using it, right? It's just changing the base URL, adding your API token, and away you go. So yes, you can use this with all kinds of other backends. And if you can't use it directly, like say Anthropic, there's some wrappers for it, so you can use it, easily. And the idea is, it's everyone's using it. That's why we're using it.
That's right. Everybody's doing it, so we're doing it too. Yeah.
It's compatible with everything.
Okay, and then in terms of the model here, we picked the latest and greatest from OpenAI. And what's your sort of 2-sentence explanation here on this?
Yeah, everywhere you used to use 3.5 or 4 or whatever, it's just used 4.1, mini or nano now. It's just the best, fastest, cheapest.
I was looking at their docs earlier, and it's their flagship model. So, there we are. Okay, great. Thanks for the insights, Wiz. I'm going to go ahead and introduce now how to actually hit this OpenAI API, and then Wiz will show us exactly how to do it in code. But first, a note on prerequisites. So one of the things that we haven't talked about yet, but is important, especially for beginners to understand, is that until you have kind of your interactive dev environment set up, you're not really going to be ready to do what we're going to show today and to complete the AI engineering challenge. This is something that we showed how to go ahead and get Cursor set up with Claude, how to get all of this kind of basic app development setup stuff done. Just a couple months ago, we did an event on this, and this idea of setting up your IDE for LLM application development, for production AI engineering. This is something that you must do first. And, it's important to understand that this has kind of evolved, but it's kind of stayed the same. For instance, back in 2022, you're using Git, you're using the shell, you're using kind of Conda and Jupyter notebooks, you're using VS Code, FastAPI, and Docker. We're using a lot of the same things in 2025. Main differences that we're recommending are just move from Conda to UV, move from VS Code to Cursor. Other than that, it's kind of the same, but being able to engage with the command line, being able to do version control, being able to make sure that you're doing your package management stuff correctly. These are kind of table stakes to get in the game. And this is where, you start to get into the development side of AI assisted development. While you can, get help on Git and what's happening exactly in the code through tools like Claude built into Cursor, and you can sort of chat with it. It's important to sort of make sure that you understand that getting this all set up is something you have to do first. And so if you want to go deeper into exactly how to get that set up, check out the event we did just a couple months ago. That's kind of prerequisite to what we're doing today. And importantly, just like what we're doing today, you should kind of focus on learning one tool of each type on one operating system. So if you're a Windows user, figure out we recommend going with WSL and figure out how to get a Linux terminal set up. That's one of the first steps you're going to have to take. If you're a Mac user or Linux user, much easier. You can sort of avoid that whole step. But whatever OS you're on, get your dev environment set up there, just like you would if you got a computer the first day as your first AI engineer role. And so, on the topic of code editors, I want to sort of just bring up real quick was we're not recommending Windsurf yet, even though they're in the news recently. But why Cursor with Claude? Why is this a best practice tool today? Is it just because they just are raising $900 million at a $9 billion valuation, or just because it's a really good tool? What's going on here?
Listen, all of these tools are doing the same thing on the same fork of VS Code. Okay.
Yeah.
Even VS Code's implementation, I'm not trying to suggest that there is no difference and there's not a different level of comfort you can have, and et cetera, but there's no difference, we're suggesting Cursor because it's good. It does what it needs to do. Windsurf probably also does what it needs to do. And I'm certain that a massive injection of cash and talent isn't going to hurt them, right? And maybe in the next year we'll say Windsurf is good, does what it needs to do. But the reality is we have to pick one. We're picking Cursor because it has shown the most I would say staying power so far. Again, subject to change, but we have to pick one. At the end of the day, they're all doing the same things in the same kinds of ways. They all have support for MCP, and they all have support for rules, and they all have support for et cetera, et cetera. You know, they're the idea is you should be using, and this is not a hot take, but maybe it's a little hot, right? You should be using an AI code editor these days, an AID, right? Like that is true. And so if you're like, Wiz, I don't believe you, I prefer windsurf. Hey, keep using it, man. You know, like that's good. But if you're sitting here trying to tell me I still use Notepad++ with no AI at all, I'm gonna say to you, you really gotta move. You move to the next step, you know?
That's right. That's right. Right. Somebody's coming for your job that is using that AI code editor. Okay. All right. Good stuff. Then let's go ahead and introduce the OpenAI chat completions API, and you can show us how to use it in just a moment. This is an important thing to understand. Many of you probably already know this, but this is a great time to start learning this as a new AI engineer, as a new aspiring AI engineer even. This was something that was introduced in 2023 and really became an industry standard. It's been updated as of 2025, and specifically this idea of a chat style model. This is sort of, instead of just putting in text and getting out text in, text out, what we're doing is we're sort of allowing the LLM to kind of have a conversation. Again, it's that design pattern of in context learning. What are the things that we're putting in context as we kind of have a conversation? And the difference between chats and text in, text out is that we actually put in a list of messages. And then each time we get an output from the LLM, we get another message appended to the list of messages. And you can kind of see here that we have a few different roles in these examples that we have shown on screen. The role now that's important to understand is the developer role. The developer role has replaced this idea of the system prompt. And it's basically like, it's up to you as the developer working behind where the user sees to describe how you want the LLM to behave, how you want it to appear, what kind of role you want it to take, the vibes you want it to give. You know, for instance, the developer role might just say, talk like a pirate. And the user role is just your user interacting with your application. Or it could be, you know, could actually be you pretending to be a user on the front end. And this idea of developer role and user role, on the one hand, we're providing instructions, we're kind of setting higher level objectives. The user is just you testing this thing, or it's your actual user. Like every time a user hits your app, you'll see the user messages on the back end. And finally, there's this idea of the assistant role. And the assistant role is anytime the AI responds to a user inquiry, right? And additionally, importantly, you can sort of act like the AI responding, provide sort of a user input and then an assistant input. And that's kind of like a one-shot example. For instance, here's the sort of question answer one-shot example. Who won the World Series? The Los Angeles Dodgers won the World Series. So you're sort of having a conversation, you know, and you're sort of mimicking a real conversation with your one-shot, two-shot, few-shot examples. And, you know, this is from the most recent version of the OpenAI docs here. The developer role are instructions provided by the app developer. That's you. And importantly, these will be prioritized ahead of user messages. So it sort of has a bigger weight. Whatever you write in the developer role, that's going to impact everything about your application. Whereas the user role is just instructions provided or questions asked by the end user. And finally, the assistant role is messages generated by the model or examples that you provide. And so to see exactly how this works, we're going to head back to the Wiz here for a full handoff to show you the first part of our GitHub repo, This is a notebook that's going to show you exactly how to hit the OpenAI API like a real developer. Wiz, over to you.
Yes. Okay. So, this is basically and straightforwardly a collab notebook that's going to show us how we can use OpenAI as a developer. What does that mean? Just how do we use the OpenAI, Python SDK? We're going to leverage this when we build our application. That's part of the challenge. First of all, of course, we need our OpenAI API key. We're going to use this as an environment variable. And then we're going to use this Python standard library getPass so that you don't have to keep your password, your OpenAI key in plain text in the notebook. And then we are going to look at some prompts. As Greg has already mentioned, there's this idea of developer, assistant, and user prompt. The basic idea here is that we are going to use these three prompts to, achieve different tasks, as Greg just mentioned. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to share my my cursor window with you guys so that you can see this as it exists in the code in cursor. So we have it here, and you'll notice that we have a client. The client is basically, what it seems like. It's just a client. It is what lets us hit OpenAI, right? And you'll notice that we have nothing in here. But if we wanted to, we could add a new base URL. And this base URL is where we would do things like change this to work with another provider, right? So this is the flexibility that the OpenAI client offers us. You'll notice that we have this prompt, and then we have this client, which is what we just set up. We have a chat endpoint, a completions endpoint, and then create to create a request. We have our model, which is GPT 4.1 Nano in this case. And then we have some messages. You'll notice that the messages are always in this object form. This object form basically allows us to specify the role of the message as we see above here. We get a response, and we get this response in this big blob, right? Filled with information, which is awesome, but we don't care about for the purposes of our application just yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to create some helper functions that just pretty prints the response without all of that other stuff. And this is just going to make it so that we can see our responses directly. We can test the helper function by, using the same prompt, creating a user prompt with that prompt, and then using get response, and then pretty printing our ChatGPT response, and it will give us this markdown formatted, blob instead of the thing that we saw above, which is containing too much information. Let's extend this a little bit and use our developer message, right? So instead of having just a user prompt, we're going to also have a developer prompt. Now, what the developer prompt does very straightforwardly is it's like a place you can add instructions and things like this. So in this case, we have you are irate and extremely hungry, and then we have some question: do you prefer ice or cubed ice? You'll notice that the model's response is, right here. Are you kidding me? I don't have time to mess around. I'm absolutely starving, et cetera, et cetera. All this is showing us is that while the developer prompt is here and clearly influencing the response, it is not actually, we're not addressing it directly in the response. So let's do the same thing, but instead of the angry developer prompt, let's use a joyful developer prompt. And we see, I think Crush Ice is so fun and refreshing because it cools drinks quickly and adds a nice texture. There you go. Okay. Then we have this idea of few shot prompting, right? So this is going to be important as you move through things in your prompting, experimentation. What we're going to show is just this simple example, right? So we can ask, please use the word simple and fall bean in a sentence. And then we get some like hallucination, right? The model just kind of makes something up because it has no idea what these words mean. So what we can do is, using the assistant prompt, we can actually define or help define what these words mean. So we have the user prompt, which defines what simple means, and then we have an example sentence. And then we can ask for a new sentence that uses the definition of fall bean. And then we get a correct sentence. Simple fall bean crafted by the craftsman ensures smooth rotation, reliable fasting for all our machinery, right? The idea here being that we have the we have the actual ability to show examples, right, through those user and assistant prompts. Then, of course, we have our favorite chain of thought. Now, you'll notice, I asked this question, right? Billy wants to get home from San Fran before 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. It's currently 1 p.m. local time. Billy can either fly and then take a bus, which is going to take 5 hours, or teleport in a bus, which is going to take 1 hour. Does it matter which option Billy selects, right? And we get the response, yes, it does matter, right? But it still says you could take the whole bus time, right? Which is not true, because 1 p.m. local time in San Fran is too late. So our option would get us in after our event started. The idea is that the model, you'll notice it does a bit of thinking step by step, right? But it doesn't really go full send. So what we can do is that with the same prompt, we can add, let's think step by step, right? And this kind of thought process, by the way, is the same thing that powers models like O4 and O3, right? All of these reasoning models. This is what helps power them. This idea of chain of thought. Now, when we add this step by step, you can see we analyze the current situation, we look at both options, we calculate arrival times, and then it does matter because the flying plus bus option will get him after the deadline. So by encouraging the model to think through the problem step by step, we can see that we actually get a better response, right? And this is really important when we're making applications as we go forward. All right, there you go. With that, I'm going to pass you guys back to Greg, who will help us get to our next demo.
All right. Yes. Thanks, Wiz. So that's exactly how to hit the OpenAI API like a developer here. What we want to think about next is we want to think about how we can leverage this to actually do the AI engineering challenge. But we're going to take a quick pit stop in AI assisted development on our way into that. Importantly, as we mentioned before, a vibe coder is not going to take your job. It's AI assisted developers that will take your job. And Cursor is crushing it. They're the best practice tool. And the idea of using Cursor isn't to let Cursor be the AI. That's sort of the idea of Devin and Manus. The idea is to make a human AI programmer an order of magnitude more effective. And the idea is to take this further and to take this much further in the future. And this is certainly something that is highly likely to happen. When we think about AI assisted development, we want to automate the pieces to the puzzle that we should, and we want to keep the pieces to the puzzle that should stay with the human. So for instance, indexing the documents. Should you be spending all your time reading docs? Probably not. The AI can do that well. Should you set up rules that you're consistently going to use so that you don't have to continually reinforce them manually? Yes. Should you get help from the AI to create outlines and to suggest revisions to the code and improvements to the code? Yes. But should you always be the one trying to understand the code, trying to give it the final sign off, trying to say, yeah, that looks good to me? Yes. So what we're going to show you as we get into the AI engineering challenge is we can give Cursor instructions on how we want it to behave. And what we should be doing is we should be using the kind of chat mode that gives us a little bit more agency than if we actually use the full agent mode, which, while fun and cool, is not where we actually want to be here. So Wiz, I'd just like to give you an opportunity to comment before we get into this last demo. Why is it so important to understand this difference between vibe coding and AI assisted development?
Yeah, basically, it's just how set up for success you're going to be, right? Again, there's nothing wrong with vibe coding. Like, it's not. It is fun. It's exciting. It's interesting. It's really good for hacking, right? On weekend projects, like it's just not got a real place for sustainable production development, right? And that's it. The differences between the two are not an ocean, right? It's not a deep chasm between the two. They're similar enough, right? In execution, it's just being more thoughtful, well thought out, et cetera, right? That's what's going to be the difference maker between these two styles of development, right? Approaching it like a software engineer would, approaching it like a senior engineer would, as opposed to just please make me code, make it go burr, right?
Right.
And that's why it's important to understand the difference, because if you don't want to be like AI can already make good prompts and come up with ideas, right? So if you just want to vibe code all day every day, it's a very straightforwardly replaceable skill set, right?
Right.
If you want to, have some assurance that you're going to stick around for at least a little while longer while the machines get better and better, approaching it like a senior would, right? We are all seniors now to AI. If we act like juniors still, we're just going to get swept up.
Swept up. Yep. No, that's no good. Let's go ahead and, I think everybody's ready to sort of get into the challenge here, Wiz. And just a quick reminder before I hand it off to you, to everyone, like, if you're just getting started, again, it will be a little bit painful to kind of get spun up, to get everything working, to get your Git and all of this environment stuff really going. We're going to assume that's all done before we get into the AIE challenge. We're going to have to get that set up. We're not showing that today. We've showed that elsewhere. We're really going to focus in on deploying our first app and deploying our first app using this app stack that we've shown you and that we've walked through. So with that, Wiz, over to you to show everybody how to build, ship, and share their very first LLM application. Real production grade stuff. Take it away.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so here we go. We're going to start in the browser, then we're going to move over to some code. So what are we looking at? Well, this is GitHub. This is where we're going to start. So it's the AI Engineer Challenge. It's going to be straightforward. The idea is the first thing we need to do is we need to fork this repository. And the way we're going to fork this repository is by clicking the little fork button here, right? And then we can create this AI Engineering Challenge, and then we can create the fork. So this is the first step of what we're going to do, right? And you might ask, why are we going to fork this repository instead of just cloning it? Well, because we want to commit changes to it, right? And you don't have access to do that on the main. So first we'll fork. Once we fork it, we're going to go ahead and we're going to grab the git clone option, and we're going to use SSH because we just always use SSH. If you follow our on-ramp, you're going to wind up with SSH set up, right? So now we have that in our clipboard. We're going to keep that in mind. And what we're going to do before we move to showing you guys some of the code is we're going to look at what this will result in. So what is this going to do at the end of the day, right? And what you're going to wind up with is something that it may not look anything like this, right? But something in function that's similar to this, where we have the ability to provide an API key and then ask questions and get responses, right? So I can say things like, is vibe coding the future? And then our LLM is going to process this message, and then it's going to go through and it's going to give us a awesome little summary, right? This is the idea, though. We're just wrapping ChatGPT in a front end that makes us happy, and we're pushing it to this deployed link, and everybody can use this. You will have to provide your own API key, but everyone can use this by visiting the link we put in the chat. And this is what you're going to wind up with at the end of this challenge, right? So I'm going to show you one more thing, which is how this looks in Vercel. So you'll notice that we have this project called the AI Engineer Challenge. We've got this production deployment, and we have these domains that we have that express where our app lives. We have some firewall, we have some observability, and we have what we're actually looking at, the actual code that was used to generate this. Now, all of this is handled through Vercel for us. And you'll notice when we go through the rest of the demo, to do this in reality is very straightforward, right? But you can see we have this branch, and in this branch, we have everything that we've got. We've got our build logs. This is how we built the app. We have our deployment summary, right? Which is our functions, including our API. It's all done through Vercel, right? This is what we're going to wind up with. Okay, so now that we've seen what we're going to wind up with, we've seen forking the repository, which again, we just did by clicking the fork button, and then we went to code to grab our SSH address. We are now good to go into our actual VS Code window, and we are going to look at this in the code. Okay, so of course, I've cheated a little bit, right? I've already cloned this, but the idea would be we would go to our terminal and we would use our git clone with that new SSH address we just got, and then we would hit enter and we would have a good time. But I've already done that, so we're not going to go through it now. So we have a couple things in the README that we want to make sure we've done. The first is making sure we've set up our interactive dev environment. This is needed for our Git to work, right? This is needed for us to have a cursor and for us to have UV, something we're going to use. And then we have our first step, which is going to be accessing GPT 4.1 mini like a developer, which is a notebook you just saw. If you wanted to run that locally, you can use UV to run it locally. We do, though, also provide, of course, a Colab link if you prefer Colab. The next step you've already done, which is forking and cloning this repository. The next step is setting up for vibe coding success. So this is where we're going to cheat just a little bit. Instead of going directly to vibe code world, right? We're going to take a pit stop and we're going to do some pre-work, right? We're going to do a little bit of preamble. And the reason we're going to do this is because we want to find success with our vibe code, right? We don't want to just, even in the most simple of cases, we want to think critically about the thing we're trying to produce. So we need to do a couple things. First thing we need to do is we need to make sure that our agent, when we use it, is going to have access to documentation, and that documentation is going to be, from the tool's website. Okay, then what we're going to do is we're going to look at this by using Command-Shift-P or Control-Shift-P if you're on Windows. We're going to type in doc, or we're going to type in custom doc, right? And we can go to the add new custom docs. And then let's say we just want to, take some random documentation for React, right? In this case, we don't care too much about this, but we'll just do it for the purposes of an example, right? We're going to copy and paste this into the add docs prompt. We're going to see React, prefix React, entry point React, learn. Then we're going to hit confirm. We have to choose a new name. Let's call it React 2, right? So just to keep things real above board. And then we'll see that we have the two different options here. React 2. We've already indexed Next.js. We've just started indexing our Vercel docs, and we need to do this so that our LLM has access to the latest documentation, right? If we don't do this, we wind up in a situation where we might hallucinate or use old versions, et cetera, et cetera. So this is the first thing we do to find success with our vibe coding. The second thing we do is in this .cursor/rules, we build some rules. Now you'll notice that we have three sets of rules: front end rule, general rule, and README rule. Okay, so our front end rule is what's going to help us understand how to set this up as the front end. We've set some rule types for this, right? The rule type is going to be always. So it's attached to every chat and Command K request. What does this mean? Every time we use the chat window, we're going to use this rule. Now you can set more granular rules, right? Like we can say agent requested, and we can see useful for when you need to design a front end, right? And now when we're designing a front end with our agent, it's going to be able to see that it should use this rule, and therefore it should use it, right? Our README rule. we have a different rule type, which is auto attach, which is every time we're working with a .md file, right? And, Greg and I like keeping things light, keeping things fun. And so the rules reflect it should be a dope README, right? It shouldn't just be boring, plain README. And it should be fun, but still be technically accurate, right? A balance that's very important to us. The idea, though, is that these rules, right, keep us on track. So what other rules do we have? Well, we have my favorite rules, which is this general rules. You should always commit your changes whenever you update code. Always write well-documented code. Only work on one feature at a time, and explain your decisions thoroughly to the user, right? These are just simple rules that are always going to be leveraged in the always category here, right? And they help the vibe coding experience, even though it's a little bit more toward AI-assisted development, right? It helps it be on Rails a bit, helps it really, be more likely to be successful. Okay, now we've set up for vibe code success. Now we're going to vibe code. We're going to go ahead and use Command L or Control L if you're on Windows, and we're going to open up our agent. And you'll notice that, of course, I've already done this because this is a cooking show, so the magic's already happened, right? But the idea is that we will simply ask Cursor to create a front end, and then we will run the front end. And then if we run into any errors, we will copy and paste them back into the Cursor chat window and ask Cursor to fix them. That's it. That's what we're going to do. So that whole matrix style, terminal style UI, this was accomplished in the following prompts. I said, using the front end rule, please create a front end for the application that looks like a matrix style terminal. We see the agent just full sending, looking at our files, right? Creating some package.json, doing some stuff with TypeScript. Don't know, don't care. Making a TS config. This seems like it's necessary. Don't know, don't care. Creating a layout for Next.js. I have no idea what any of this code does, but you best believe that I clicked accept on it, right? And did the same thing. And then it produced a README because we asked it to, and that's nice of it. It also wants us to commit our changes, which is important. And so we do. And then the app should work with the FastAPI server backend, but it looks cool as hell because it wasn't working with the backend, right? I didn't even provide an error. I just said, it should work with it. And so the agent changed whatever it needed to change, and now it does work with the backend, right? That's it. That's that whole step, right? We just ask Claude to make the front end in a style we want. You'll notice that we're in agent mode. We're in auto mode. We are full send. We are not. It's not asking anything. We're not reviewing. We're just mashing accept, right? That's the vibe code. That's how we do it. Now, there's one more piece that you're probably like, well, I'm missing something, Chris, right? I'm missing, what is the app actually doing? And this is the backend code that we've provided for you. So we've provided this template for you. It's got more comments than it needs to, but the idea is that this should be very helpful in understanding what is actually required on the API side. And you'll see it's not much, right? We have some imports, of course, FastAPI, Pydantic. We have our OpenAI import, and then we create an app and we title it, right? OpenAI Chat API. Perfect. We do this CORS middleware. We need to do this because we have this front end, back end situation. If we don't do this, then our app will complain. And then we build our data model. This data model is for Pydantic, and it helps everything go smoothly between the front and back end. And then you'll notice that we have our app.post API chat, right? This is the endpoint that we'll hit. It's going to be a streaming endpoint, right? As you saw in the demonstration, we're streaming the tokens out because we don't want to wait. We don't want that bad UX, right? And what it's going to do is it's going to take that data model as a request. It's going to initialize a client with an API key, and then it's going to use this generate function and then stream the response through FastAPI's streaming response endpoint, right? We also have a health endpoint, so we can check the health, and then we are running it with Uvicorn, right? Uvicorn is going to be the thing that runs it. More technically in Vercel, it's actually going to use this serverless pattern, but we will do this for local development so that we can run this thing locally, right? And that's it. It's just a streaming API endpoint for FastAPI. That's our app, right? So we've got our app, we've got our front end, right? We've got what we need. The only thing left to do now is to deploy it with Vercel. And so what we do is we simply, make sure we've signed into Vercel in our browser. We ensure we have NPM, right? Which is likely to have been done while you were vibe coding. If it's not, though, ask Cursor, right? If you need, hey Cursor, right? Command L in the browser. Command L. Start a new chat. How do I install NPM? Boom, right? This is what we want to get used to. Staying in the IDE, leveraging it as much as possible to help us do our jobs. Finally, we deploy it with Vercel. We just type the word Vercel, and then it works, right? And then it appears on the website. That's it. That's all you do, right? There's like some instructions the first time you do this, but after you do it the first time, right, we'll go to the terminal, I'll open it up, and we'll just write Vercel. And that's it. And now our app is being rebuilt on that endpoint that you guys have access to, and the new version will be available. There's no changes, so it's going to be the same. But that's it, right? This is why we chose Vercel. There is no thinking. There is no worrying. It just works, right? It just deploys. And of course, you can run it locally. You might ask, well, how do we run it locally? Which is a great question. Well, because of our rules, right? We have a README, which tells us, and by the way, look how cool that README looks. Many emojis, right? Fun, but also accurate, right? And it tells us exactly how to run that front end. And how do we run the back end? You best believe there's a README. I wrote this one, so it doesn't look as cool, but it has exactly what you need to run the back end, right? And that's if you want to do some local development before you push into Vercel. And this is the idea, right? The challenge isn't to understand how to produce a production grade application, though you'll wind up with that, right? The challenge is how do we leverage this incredible tool called Cursor or whatever version you're using to make us able to produce these POCs quickly, effectively, and okay, I'm biased. In a way, it looked cool. I liked how the Matrix one looked. Okay, and that's it. We're gonna pass you back to Greg. Hopefully, this has been helpful to have the step-by-step walkthrough. Right, a basic idea again. We built the API. Once we have the API set up and working, all we have to do is say, "Hey, whip up a front end for me using whatever framework," and Cursor just does that. And then we deploy it using Vercel by typing Vercel into our command line. That is the idea. Before I pass you guys back to Greg, got to ask you to ring the bell. We're live every Wednesday at the same time. We love to see you in the next one. And with that, we'll head back to Dr. Greg to close this out.
All right. That was excellent, Wiz. Love that. Let's go ahead and close out. We've got a couple of questions that I want to rapid fire get to. I think in conclusion today, we did see that this AI Engineer Challenge has some key pieces that are important to understand. And in doing AI assisted development, we're also kind of doing vibe coding sometimes. We need sort of a both and, setup to really kind of embrace what's happening out there at the edge today. And getting that AI code editor is the very first step. Once you get it going, then you can start using it to go fully end to end, as you showed us today. That was really, really cool how that all came together in the end. So we do have a couple of questions. I want to give the opportunity for anybody else that really has one. We've got a couple of tool questions real quick. I think one earlier that I wanted to get to from the YouTube chat was any thoughts on fly.io? You can do a similar thing, I guess, with Vercel. Wesley asks.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you're going to hear this a lot in the current year, okay?
Uh-huh.
use the tool that you're used to, use the patterns you're used to, right? There is a tool for you. If you like Fly.io, if you understand a Docker file, right? Or you're confident that, whatever tool you're using is going to be able to help you vibe code up a Docker file, use those tools. Use whatever reduces your velocity. The whole idea is that you can attach all these things to your IDE, your AI IDE, right? You can attach Fly.io docs to Cursor, right? Make that a pleasant experience. You can attach the Vercel docs. You can attach, Terraform docs. You can get as fancy, as scalable as you want. The idea is we can feed those docs into our AI IDE, and we can have some level of confidence that it's going to understand how to do these basic actions relatively straightforwardly. So yeah, Fly.io, great. Similar kind of, solving a similar kind of problem. It's great.
Sure. Luke asks, as early adopters, do you recommend Graphite? Graphite.dev for managing Git workflows. I think we recommend what we walked through today, but another one of these tool questions. Quick response here.
Yeah, Graphite's great.
Okay, Graphite's great. Okay. So other questions, please go ahead and throw them into the comments and we'll get to them asynchronously. Thank you for joining us today and thank you for walking us through that, Wiz. I think it's time to go ahead and wrap up the session for the day. All right. So thanks so much again for joining us for the AI Engineering Challenge, guys. If you're not part of the AI Makerspace Discord community yet, we'd love to see you in there to start building, shipping, and sharing. This is a great place to start, and go ahead and smash the general channel or the build, ship, share channel with your vibe-coded first LLM application. I'd also like to let you guys know about Cohort 7 of the AI Engineering Bootcamp. The AI Engineer Challenge is a prerequisite for anybody that wants to enroll. And so if you like doing this kind of thing, you might be the right person to accelerate your LLM application development and join us on June 24th. We've got a 10-week boot camp that we're offering for both North American time zones and for the first time EU international time zones. And every enrollment in the month of May will receive a signed copy of our upcoming book, the AI Engineering Bootcamp book that is going to come out later this year, and it will be signed by both Dr. Greg and the Wiz for you guys if you sign up in the month of May. Finally, if you would like to join us next week, we're going to be taking our best practice RAG stack event and taking it to the next enterprise production level. We'll talk more about once you build a LangGraph RAG application, how can you actually put that more into a CSP-like enterprise production environment? And what does the process look like as an engineer in an enterprise company today? So that one's going to be great for AI engineers as well as AI engineering leaders. And finally, if you would like to start learning for free, check out our open source materials that go deep into the LLM and show you a little bit more about how to train, fine-tune, and really explore what's happening behind the API that we are generally building with as AI engineers. And that's a wrap for today. Again, thank you for joining us for the AI Engineer Challenge. We hope you found this useful, and we hope that you'll continue to build, ship, and share. Don't forget, if you do complete the challenge, to make a post about it and tag us on LinkedIn, tag us on X. It really helps us out and amplifies the message to a larger audience. And we will do our best to amplify you as well so that you can expand your reach. So until next time, keep building, shipping, and sharing, and we'll most certainly do the same. We'll see you next week on YouTube, everybody. Have a good one.